Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Maggie. And I hope that at the end of the session, you will not change your mind. What I am trying to talk about today is an attempt to understand what is Daesh. I believe that we would make a very big mistake if we consider them only a group of criminals. Thank you. Criminals that we could overcome by killing them or defeating them militarily. It is important to know who they are, from where they are coming, how do they think, and what was the factors that made them emerge in this area. That's why maybe I will talk a little bit long about I prefer to use Daesh. Daesh is the Arabic word which means الدولة الإسلامية في العراق والشام. Islamic State in Iraq and Levant. First of all, I as a Muslim, I cannot deny that the way of thinking of Daesh is completely out of Islam religion. It is related to one of the branches of Islam religions. We have to admit that. And I believe that there are many researchers, Islamic researchers, who say even religious people, like for example in my country, maybe Maggie will remember, there's an Islamic party called Islamic League. The leader of this party has written a book about Daesh, and he admits there that we cannot say they are not Muslims, and their understanding or interpretation of the text of Quran is completely out of the Islam. It is a problem with maybe everyone, all of you know that interpretation of the text differs from different person to, and also differs from different contexts of history and environment. That's why the root of their ideology, their understanding of Islam, goes back to a very famous secular lived in 12th and 13th century called Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah was living in a situation after the attacks of Mongols and Tatarians to the Islamic land. And Islamic lands by that time was in a very miserable situation. So he took the most extremist interpretation for the text as a reaction to what's happening to the Islamic people by that time. On the 18th century, another guy from Najd, from Saudi Arabia, started to go back to this type of interpretation of Islam called Muhammad Abdul Wahhab. That's why Salafism, sometimes called Wahhabism, to refer to his name. And in fact, the foundation of Saudi Arabia Kingdom goes back to an agreement between one of the princes of Al Saud family with this guy, Muhammad Abdul Wahhab. They agreed together that Muhammad Abdul Wahhab would take over all of religion, and Muhammad ibn Saud will be the political leader. But of course, this first attempt to build a country called Saudi Arabia failed, because by that time Ottoman Empire was very powerful, and they sent an army and defeated them. But since that time, the Saudi family had an agreement with the Wahhabis and tried again and again until the third time they succeeded to found what we call it, we see it now as Saudi Arabia Kingdom. But very soon, there were differences between us, Dr. Fuad Ibrahim, who is a secular from Saudi Arabia and has a very good book called Daesh from al-Najdi, means that Muhammad Abdul Wahab, who is from Najd, an area inside Saudi Arabia, to al-Baghdadi. That's the book that he wrote about Daesh. It's a very good book. I hope that someday it will be translated into English. I don't know whether it has been translated or not. He says very soon differences started between the religious part and the political part. For the Saudis, it was the most important thing for them was how to use religion to impose their rule. So since that time, and since the foundation of Saudi Arabia, there were conflicts between the original Wahhabism and the official Wahhabism adopted by Saudi Arabian family, royal family. You can see the symbol of this agreement even on the flag of Saudi Arabia until now, which is a sword plus La ilaha illallah, no God except Allah, which is a clear symbol of joining together power of politics and ruling with the power of religion. What is Salafism? Salafism, many of the researchers believe that Salafism is a very simple interpretation of Islam, literally interpretation of the texts of Quran and the statements of Prophet Muhammad. They don't believe in any changes. They believe for every question we face today, we have go back 1,400 years back to ask ourselves, if there were Prophet Muhammad here, how would he have been deal with this issue? They don't accept any deep interpretation. They only take the literal meanings of the text and the positions of Prophet Muhammad, his first generation followers and second generation followers. That's why many researchers say that Salafism is nothing but a Bedouin understanding of Islam. Badawi. Bedouin. Bedouin understanding from Islam. But in the beginning of 80s of last century, I am not sure whether I can call it a new Salafism emerged, or as Fuad Ibrahim says, going back to the original Salafism, which called Salafi jihadists. Salafi jihadists, there are many roots for their ideologies. There are many people like Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi, Abu Qatada al-Falastini, Ayman al-Dawahiri. Some people even say that they refer in some of their ideas to a very famous person from Egypt who has been executed by Jamal Abdel Nasser, who is in 1966. Sayyid Qutb, who has been executed by Jamal Abdel Nasser in 1966. But again, Fuad Ibrahim says, I don't think they have brought a new thing. In fact, they went back to the original Wahhabism and Salafism. In the beginning, I said that there were differences between Muhammad Abdul Wahab and his followers, with the Prince of Al Saud and his followers. So Fuad Ibrahim believes that Salafi jihadists are not nothing new. They are the original Wahhabism. They go back to the original Wahhabism. However, this introduction is important to know, to find out where are the ideological roots of you all know that in the past centuries there were a very high rate of violence between different kind of ideologies, religious, kings, countries. Violence was one of the behaviors of human beings since it started to be on this earth. However, let us go to I believe that, as I said, the Daesh has a real understanding and view, clear understanding and view toward the world we live in. And according to this view, they have a very clearly defined strategy about their struggle. How they can they can manage to defeat their enemies and to control the world and get back the Islamic State with Khalifa. To understand this strategy, I believe that the book called Management of Savagery is the best reference to go and to read. Because in this book, if you read this book and compare what it says to what Daesh does, you can see relatively 100% matching between what they say and what they do. What this book says and what Daesh does. This book has first been published on internet in 2004. It holds the name of course, it's not a real name, Abibakir Naji. Since it doesn't point to any events after the Iraq invasion, it seems to be this book has written before that. But after the 11th of September, because in many occasions talks about the 11th of September. The majority of the people who have read the book and they are professional, in fact I'm not a professional in religion, they say it seems that this book has been adapted by the leadership of al-Qaida and has been written by one of their leaders. They suggest many names, but no one for sure knows who is the real person calls himself Abibakir Naji. In the introduction of this book, I want to say I don't want to read all the book. I will use the part that let us understand what is the strategy of Daesh. In the introduction, it's important to understand the introduction because it gives us their view about our world. They say, they start to talk about our world, referring to the Sykes-Picot Agreement. All of you know that Sykes-Picot Agreement was an agreement between the British and French with the acceptance of Russians by that time in 1916. This agreement is about how to divide Ottoman Empire's land after collapsing of the empire. And Abibakir Naji says, our world order now has been started to be founded by Sykes-Picot Agreement. And that's foundation finalized by the founding of United Nations. And starts to explain what happened. The colonial powers who won the first war, decided to divide the Islamic land, by that time was Ottoman Empire, in between themselves, according to their interests, and the balance of power between themselves also, of course. So their goal was first to put an end to Islamic superpower in the world, which was an Ottoman Empire, and second, to control, divide the area, and to control every part of it according to their interests. And this is, Abibakir Naji says, this is the main core of our problem that we live. Everything started from here and finalized when the UN founded. After the Second War, there were two-pole system in Western Bloc and Eastern Bloc, and all the countries between these two poles were either loyal to this one or to the other one, otherwise no one can survive. So this is the situation that made they use a word called millah, which means in English nation, but doesn't mean nation as we know it now. They mean the Islam nation. So whoever is Muslim, wherever is Muslims live, is Islam's land, and we are one nation called Millat al-Islam. Since that agreement, our land has been divided, our power has been finished, we became slaves of West, either West or East. And after the Second War, after the collapse of Soviet Union, the situation became worse because all of us became slaves of Western and especially American superpower. So if this is the situation, this world is completely destroyed by superpowers, colonial powers, anti-Islam powers, as they say. So our war is a global war against them. It's not a local war to control this country or this state, or it is a global war between what they say Dar al-Kufr or Dar al-Iman, land of unbelief and land of believers. Land of believers doesn't mean geographically. It's not only a geographic word. Wherever the real believers are, this is land of believers. Wherever the unbelievers control the situation, this is unbelievers' land. For example, they consider all the Islamic countries now who has good relations, for example, with West or others, still they are land of unbelievers because controlled by local authorities who are loyal to the, as they say, crusaders. So what is the plan in this situation? Plan of Salafi jihadists or al-Qaida or even Daesh is there's 3 stages should be taken to reach the goal of founding the new Islamic State and control the world again. The first one, I'm not sure whether this translation is right or not, could be translated as spite and attrition. The first stage is spite and attrition. In Arabic, شوكة الكناية أستاذ فرج.
Yeah, I think
it's good?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What is this? In this stage, they plan, the whole strategic plan is to, it is true that superpower like the United States of America is a very big, powerful, militarily, politically, and economically very powerful superpower, but they cannot fight on all fronts. So the main strategy is to pull apart their forces to start a war against them everywhere. so that they cannot concentrate on some point. If you start attacking them, for example, in Afghanistan only, they can concentrate on Afghanistan, bring their army, as they did, and they put an end to Taliban's government. But if we could start the fight all over the world, not only in Islamic countries, but even in their own countries, and it's very interesting too that he mentions, even if you hit a head of a crusader by a stick, it is something. And you can see that in Europe, some people just use a knife to attack any ordinary person. What is the strategy from this? If you attack a nightclub, they have to bring new forces to protect that nightclub. If you attack a touristic site, they have to bring forces to protect this, etc., etc. So in this case, you make them cannot send troops to everywhere, to fight everywhere. It's impossible for any army, any state, to fight around the world at the same time. This is the strategy. This is the first stage of them. So they start to attack in Islamic countries, in Europe, in Africa, even in Australia, wherever they could reach. This is the first attempt. When we reach a level that we could destabilize some countries, then the second stage will start. It's very strange to mention that they were predicting that the savagery situation would happen in these countries: Jordan, Saudi Arabia, countries of North Africa, Arabian countries of North Africa, Pakistan. They didn't predict to have savagery situation, as I will explain what is it, in Iraq and Syria. While it didn't happen in any of these countries except Iraq and Syria. In this case, you will make a destabilization in many countries, and this lets you to start to impose your power in these countries that they say. What are they briefly say the goals of the first stage, which is spite and attrition: making the enemy weak, falling his power apart by small operations in different places, and all of these operations, and it is true, will attract the attention of angry young people who admire that a small group of jihadists could do something to a superpower like America, for example. And third, which is the main goal, is to bring out some parts of these countries out of the authorities of the central governments. When destabilization happens, and let us ask, what does they mean by savagery? Abibakir Naji says that savagery is some kind of chaos, instability. But it is not only chaos and instability, it's more than that. It's a situation like it is now in Syria. Fight of all against all. This is the situation that he calls savagery. And the plan is to work to reach to that situation, and secondly, to try to manage this situation. How can you manage this situation? By imposing your power to an area which is out of control of the central government, as it is, for example, in Iraq Mosul, or in Syria, Raqqa, and to reach the violence against your enemies to the maximum level possible. Sometimes he gives an example, very expressing example. He says, if you can attack a building that some people are meeting there, your enemies are meeting there, you can attack them and blow up it by 1 kilogram of TNT, put 100 kilogram of TNT. If you can attack some point and you need only 20 fighters, bring with yourself 200 fighters to show up your power and to make your enemies so afraid that very easily can be defeated. As it happened in Mosul. You all remember that only few hundreds of Daesh fighters attacked Mosul, the second biggest city of Iraq, with thousands of troops, with heavy weapons, and within 48 hours they controlled it. Why? Because by beheadings, explodings, killing people randomly, they created an era of terror. Everyone was afraid. Everyone was trying to save himself, and they left the country, while if there were only a few hundreds of real fighters there, they could stand and protect the city from Daesh. If you look at this kind of tactics that Ibrahim Naji suggests, you can see it as I gave examples. You can see it in Daesh's behavior on daily basis. So this situation will make people terrorized and very easily defeated by you, and to accept your power and ruling. But of course, the management of savagery is not only by violence. They talking also about we should provide the minimum level of safety, of stability to the people, educate them, to give them main services, not only terrorizing, but also trying to bring them to us. If you live with us, you would live in peace in Dar al-Iman, land of believers. If you would not live with us, you are in the lands of unbelievers and you would be killed. He very clearly says, we should make this war, we should push this war to the end that everyone feel he will die. No way. So it is better to die with us because we are believers and we will go to heaven. We should make this fight that they say a real fight, a total fight between no one independent, no one is neutral. Either you are with us or with them. And finally you would be killed. Maybe with us also you would be killed. If you are with them, you surely would be killed by us. So, but also, of course, as I said, there's a very interesting statement in this, talking about the level of violence that they believe in. He says, the pact of believers is, I am quoting, blood, destruction. That's our pact. But also, of course, Ibrahim Naji, as I said, talks about we should manage the area, and even some in very details he talks about how can we deal with the problems with the services, how can we deal with the other Islamic movements who are not jihadists, how can we deal with them and try to bring them with us. In many details of this I don't see any necessary to mention here, But the last thing is, when you reach a situation like this, gradually you can control all the country. So starting from these points that they suggested, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, the North African Arabic countries, if we could succeed to manage the savagery in these countries, we will reach to the last stage of our strategy, which is enabling or taking control. And starting from these points, and it's important to remember, when these guys are busy with this fight on the ground, it doesn't mean that the others will stop. They will continue their attacks in different areas of the world to keep the superpowers and others busy and in the situation that they could not concentrate on these areas that we are trying to control. So the final part is to control whole the area, and then they don't, of course, believe in borders. Even sometimes whenever he mentions the state, he says so-called state, because they don't recognize any states, any borders. It's all Islam's land. When we take control of these areas, we start from these areas to go to the other areas and control all of them and establish our Islamic State. As I said, if you read the book and look at what Daesh doing, you can see that they are implementing literally what has written in that book. This is their strategy, and even the very narrow tactics that mentioned there, they are using it here. Very briefly, it's important to, again, I want to repeat that important to know Daesh is an organization with an ideology, a global ideology, based on one of the Sunni Islam branches called Salafism. They have a clear view toward the world, and according to this view, they have a clear strategy how to win this war. But for me, I believe, and maybe for many of you, there is an important question. Why Daesh emerged? Why this kind of interpretation of Islam, who goes back to centuries ago? At the end of 20th century and the beginning of 21st century emerged again and shows up so powerfully. I have to say here, as it is true, we cannot say Daesh is not from Islam, has no relation with Islam. It is not true. They have relation with Islam. It is also true, we cannot explain Daesh only by going back to the texts of Islam's, because we have different interpretations of Islam, which is completely different from what Daesh and Salafism says. For centuries, even inside Islamic countries, different branches of Islam lived together peacefully. Even different religions lived together peacefully. But suddenly, at the end of 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, we face a group of people who are going back to such a long way. It is a big question. We should answer that, I believe. And I will try to put ISIS into his historical context, to try to understand why now. I should admit that I agree with Abibakir Naji in one point at least, which is one of the main reasons of what we see in Middle East now is Sykes-Picot Agreement. Sykes-Picot Agreement has divided this land, Middle East, the leftover of Ottoman Empire, according to the interests of colonial powers. They didn't, it was not important for them. They were just drawing lines. This country, this part's for you, this for me. They didn't pay attention who lives there on this land. Can they live together? Can we help them to live together? Can we help them to build a state which could survive? It was not important for them. The most important thing is how to defeat the biggest Islamic power in the world by that time, and how to control these areas. What did they do, as Scott Anderson says in a very long article in New York Times Magazine, in many cases, they empowered minorities in these countries. Why? To make them loyal to the colonial powers. They cannot rule the country without the outside support. So they will be loyal to us forever. And this made a very big crisis, internal crisis in the states, post-colonial status. I will come back to this point again. Founding again, I agree with Abibakir Naji that founding of UN, United Nations, was finalizing the world's order. We have state members, and we have a principle, global principle, which is no one has the right to intervene in internal issues of any state member. This principle enabled all the local authoritarian dictatorship states in the region to oppress their people, and no one has the right to object. We have witnessed what happened to the Kurds in Turkey after the Turkish Republic, what happened to Kurds in Iraq, what happened to Sunnis in Syria, what happened to Shiites in Iraq. No one had the right to intervene, to protest, to do anything, because the main United Nations system was based on borders, sovereign states, and the principle of sovereignty, which doesn't allow anyone to intervene. And what made this situation worse was the competition between the Eastern Bloc and Western Bloc, because dictators were playing on this. If, for example, some leader is loyal to the West, Eastern countries were supporting the opposition. But even if the opposition will succeed, they will oppress others. The next opposition will be supported by the Western countries. So all leaders were playing on getting support from either East or West to continue their ruling. Again, one of the results of Sykes-Picot and foundation of UN was founding of Israel state and starting the conflict between Arabs and Israelis. This event has made, I am not sure that I'm telling the correct word, a psychological injury in the Arabs and Muslim psychology, because they believed that they have brought Jews from around the world and all Arabic and Islamic land. They gave them the land they don't owe, they don't deserve. This land belongs to Arabs, and for Muslims is a holy land, as it is for Christians and Jews. So it became one of the biggest complexes, psychological complexes in Arab world. And this was, for many decades, a source of generating extremism from extreme left, extreme nationalism, and extreme Islamism. Again, as I mentioned, one of the outcomes of the new order was our corrupted and failed states. Our states, as I said, many of them, they were ruled by minorities who are loyal to outsiders. They protect the outsiders' interests before their people's interests because they owe them. And at the same time, they don't trust their people because they are a minority. So they started to oppress them. Not only that, they started to control all the resources, all the source of revenues. Why? Because they need that to impose and continue their rule in these states. Of course, because of this situation, and because of contacts between the East and West, modern culture started to be published in our societies. And this process has started since 18th century. So there were many movements, social and political movements started to talk about citizenship, nationalism, democracy, freedom, rights, and everything. But the problem was, all of these movements were oppressed very violently by the states. And not only that, the countries who were coming to our country in the name of freedom and democracy, instead of supporting these movements, they supported the state because they were allies with them. And still this is happening today. You know, once I want to open a bracket. An American diplomat visited me in Suleimania, my hometown, and he was asking me about what is the situation, what do you think? I said, before 2003, whenever I was asking myself why people in the Middle East don't like America or hate America, I was saying maybe it's because Israel-Palestinian issue. But after 2003, when our direct contact as Kurds started with the Americans, I understand it's not the only reason. It's an important reason, but it's not the only reason. The reason is you, opposite to what you say, always supporting the dictators in the region. I told him, look around yourself and count the dictators here in this region and tell me how many of them are not supported by US. And how many real liberal democrat movements in this area are supported by you? None. In this way, even the project of modernization of our societies failed. There were, of course, some successes. For example, Dr. Muhammad Mossadegh in Iran, who was a prime minister in 1953, he was one of the reformist liberal leaders in Iran, very famous one. When he started to nationalize the oil resources, he started to limit the authorities of Shah by that time, and started to nationalize the resources, natural resources of Iran. all the colonial powers, all the Western powers supported Shah against him. So the movement failed. Also, there are other modern movements succeeded, like Jamal Abdel Nasser's movement by a coup, but Jamal Abdel Nasser himself again became a dictator. It was very hard for him to survive between East and West and to fight with Israel. He was thinking that his main duty is to fight Israel and bring back Palestine. Same thing happened for Ba'ath Party. Ba'ath Party started as a nationalist party who wants to improve the society, wants to build the economy, wants to modernize the country, but gradually again they became dictators. And always when they were liberals, they were opposed by Western countries, but when they became dictators, they were supported by Western countries. Why I am trying to explain all of this? I am trying to bring you in a real picture of an ordinary life of ordinary citizen of this region. Your state is a failed, corrupted state. Dictator imposes, depends on security control. If you have any objection, you could be not only yourself, but your family could be killed. You are living in a terror situation. You are afraid from everything. So, the global powers who promised you of democracy and freedom, they support the oppressors. You have no civil way to change. You cannot move against the dictators. You have no power, you have no weapons, you have no support from anyone. So you feel upset, frustrated. And it is very, very natural. A person who is frustrated has no way out from this terrible situation, terrible life, will turn to violence and nostalgia. Again, what helped these kind of oppressed people to go back to religion and nostalgia was using of religion by everyone, using of religion by superpowers, using of religion by local states. For example, Americans used jihadis, mujahideen in Afghanistan against the pro-Soviet government in Kabul. Turkey used Islam against the leftists in the country. For example, for the first time when multi-party system started in Turkey, there was a ruling party called People Republican Party, which is Mustafa Kemal Atatürk's party. The second party obtained in 1946, I believe, if I remember, yes, 46, called Democrat Party. This party, because Mustafa Kemal Atatürk was so secular, anti-religion, they started to use the conservative parts of the society to gain votes. So they opened way to the Islamic waves inside Turkey. So the Islamization of Turkish society starts from them. So everyone tries to use religion against its enemies. And this made a very good era for the extremists, for the people who think that we should go back to the religion, to use this situation, as it happened in Egypt. when Anwar Sadat decided to compromise with Israel and to leave the alliance with Soviet Unions, he attacked the leftists and he gave space to the Islamists. And finally, Islamists killed him. Yeah. As I said, Daesh's ideology is part of the Sunni Islam's religion. So one of the other issues that made going back to Sunni Islam, extremist Sunni Islam, was the success of the Iranian Revolution. You know, it's important to know that there is a historic conflict between Shiis and Sunnis in Islam world. It goes back to maybe 10th centuries. It's a very long conflict. There have been tens of big wars between Ottoman Empire and Safavis in Iran. There were hundreds of thousands of victims due to this conflict. So when the Shi'i version, the revolutionary Shi'i version of Islam succeeded in Iran and started to rule a country as important as Iran in the Gulf area, it became a big problem for the Sunni part of Muslims. And from this point, Sunnis started to work on their religion, even the states. And all of this in the benefit of whom? The extremists, of course. For example, I am just giving an example. According to the statistic information, Saudi Arabia has paid $70 billion between 1970 to 2002 for what? Building mosques all around the world, sending imams who believe in Salafism, publishing yearly 15 million copies of extremist Islamic books and distributing for free. And recently, they are paying for tens of TV stations, satellite TV stations, broadcasting in different parts of the world and publishing Salafism ideas. All of these factors together, if you look at the picture now, you can understand how come that these guys were able to go back to that kind of interpretation of Islam and to really found a global organization. And the golden opportunity, of course, was Afghan war. Afghan war was an important opportunity for Saudi Arabia to try to attack Iranian Revolution from behind. At the same time, it was a golden opportunity for the jihadists to start their first step toward controlling an Islamic country. And you all know that by that time, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, United States, and all Western countries supported the jihadists, supported Osama bin Laden, supported Taliban, support everyone who were against Iran and Soviet Union, supported Mujahideen, and they gradually became a global organization. Because from all Islamic countries, there were people going there saying that fighting there is jihad, and if I would die, I will go to paradise. And it was organized by states like Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and Sudan. So it was a golden situation for them, and we are now see the outcomes. Finally, I want to mention that, of course, after the what called Arab Spring, Daesh and al-Qaida, I don't think they are so different. I consider them relatively the same, but they have some differences, very brief differences, and most of it is about leadership, not about the ideology itself. When the Arab Spring came out and jihadi organizations started to emerge everywhere, they became a factor to be used by everyone, including regional powers like Turkey. Everyone knows that Turkey is using Jabhat al-Nusra, which is al-Qaida, and also Daesh. They had relations, and it's not my information, it's information from the parliament members of Turkey, from Turkish media, that they had deals with Daesh, they had deals with Jabhat al-Nusra. So all of this situation made what we see now as Daesh or jihadi organizations. Finally, I have to go back to what I started. We would do a very big mistake if we consider Daesh only a criminal organization. Also, we would do a very big mistake if we say they have no relation with Islam. Again, we will do a very big mistake if we think that's all about Islam and nothing else. That is Islam and that's it, which is not true. It's not Islam. It's part of Islam, as Inquisition was part of Christianity. We have to read Daesh in the context of history and the region. We have to understand they are a very well organized, have a very well defined ideology and strategy. If we want to defeat them, it's not enough to defeat them militarily. We should think about that problems and conflicts who made Daesh that we are seeing now. Thank you very much.